Welcome to Friday Friends, RI Elder Info's weekly look at the organizations and individuals providing resources for Rhode Island seniors, caregivers, and professionals.
Everybody, happy Friday. It is 9:00 on Friday, and you are here with me, Deb Burton, Executive Director of RA Elder Info and host of our weekly series, Friday Friends, where we bring information that you or someone you know needs to know about. Now, please hit the like button, the share button, the bells, the whistles, all those social media cues that say, hey, you really got to check this out, because we're talking about an important topic that has come up several times, and we're only, in the second full week of January? So make sure you hit the share button so that more folks can get this information regarding caregiving. Super important. Now, as you know, we are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we could not do the work without our sponsors. So big thank you to Point 32 Health Foundation, Oak Street Health, United Healthcare, as well as McCarthy Law. Here's a quick minute from McCarthy Law.
Here at McCarthy Law, we practice in the areas of estate planning, long-term care planning, elder care law, and residential real estate. Our focus is really on providing peace of mind to our clients.
If you're interested in scheduling a consultation with our office, you can feel free to reach out to us at 401-541-5540. You can also reach out via website at www.mccarthylawri.com. You also should check out our social media, both on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, for some helpful tips and tricks.
So I would like to welcome my guest this week, Daphne Hamilton.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Great. Thank you for having me. Second time in 2 months.
I know, but this topic of caregiving and what isn't allowed is something that is so important to talk about. You know, it's people are asking, how do I do this? How do I get the care that my loved one needs? How do I give the care? And how is it paid for? So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. I think especially, keeping in mind that a lot of the times when we're checking in on loved ones, we're checking in on our elderly family members and friends, especially around the holidays, making sure that they're being taken care of. But there's this whole other population of caregivers, the people providing care to those individuals, checking in on them and making sure they're okay. So I think especially after the holidays, it's stressful and it's a lot going on, that now's a good time to check in on them too.
Absolutely. And, it's one of those things that, some folks may know that I broke my right ankle. So I was homebound, chair-bound for quite some time. And I was the care recipient. And it was really hard to have lost my independence, to be able to just run to the market, to do holiday shopping. And, I'm blessed with a great caregiver, but I have to say I wasn't always the most cheery care recipient.
Yeah.
What are some of the cues that caregivers are kind of spent or maybe on the verge of burnout?
Yeah, I think that this is something that we're seeing a lot, especially because most caregivers are family members, and being a caregiver truly is a full-time job. So you have this role of a caregiver, but you also still have a role as a spouse, a partner, a daughter, a son, a family member, that they're kind of having conflicting resources for one another. And what you need to look out for is making sure that there isn't a burnout situation. So very similar to, someone experiencing signs of mental distress, you want to take a look out for emotional and physical exhaustion. So if they're unable to sleep, whether they're unable to sleep because they're caring for that person during the middle of the night, or if they're just filled with anxiety that they feel like they need to be up at every hour. Withdrawal from friends and family because they feel like this is just part of their life from here. Again, changes in appetite, changes in weight, getting sick more often. I think that that's something that, we take for granted is our health in that situation. And to your point, as far as, personality, if you're seeing a real irritability or frustration, because that's not to say a caregiver is never going to be frustrated with the situation, but there needs to be some give and take with kind of how that personality is going to interact with that person.
Absolutely. Now, what are some of the things that caregivers can do to kind of alleviate that? And I know that one of the stresses in providing care for somebody is financial. Like, can I get paid to do this?
Mm-hmm.
How does that work?
Definitely. So that's always a conversation that we're having too, because you should be able to get paid because it is a job at the end of the day. Very
Big
frequently. Yeah, exactly. And you're spending maybe hours out of work. If you have the pleasure of maybe not having that job that you're not taking time off, you're still dedicating your life really to that person. And you're providing them with a service, with caregiving services, such as toileting, bathing, providing them with transportation to doctor's appointments, things of that nature. So in our firm, we frequently are executing caregiver agreements between that elderly individual and the caregiver. So they're being able to be provided with compensation, most of the time at an hourly rate for their services. One of the kind of pitfalls is we need to be really sure that we're keeping track of what the care actually is. They can't just be getting paid for sitting there hanging out with grandpa. They need to actually be providing them with some level of care. So that detailed care log really comes into play.
And so is it almost like keeping a timesheet and a care log of, what is it that your loved one needs that you're getting paid for?
Yeah. So the agreement would be very broad in terms of giving examples of what that could include, such as bathing, making meals, pill management, anything that's truly helping them continue living their life, especially if they're residing in a residence. And the log would be very similar to how even an attorney tracks their time. So I spent X amount of hours doing such and such task, and this is my hourly rate from there.
Now you can't, or can you, say, I did 100 hours with Nana and Nana wants to pay me $100 an hour every week.
Mm-hmm.
Are there
so we definitely have conversations with what's considered reasonable. So we tend to lean more towards a minimum wage situation for someone who doesn't have, true caregiving experience. If you're of a caregiving mindset that maybe you have a nursing background, or if you do have if you're a CNA, you're able to charge a little bit more of that hourly rate because you have those services and that expertise behind you. So although it would be lovely to be able to charge, that hefty of an hourly rate, we do tend to reel it in to make it more reasonable.
Okay, that's good. And if it is a loved one who's getting paid to provide that care, do they need to file that in their taxes, or do they get 1099s or W-2s?
Yep. So it is taxable income. So that's another conversation worth having as well. So they always need to be having a conversation with the tax professional, like an accountant, because it is taxable income. So that's one of the kind of real concerns that we need to keep having with the elderly population is a lot of people are having caregiving services off the books, these cash deals going on. And you need to make sure that it is by the book, because at the end of the day, if you're needing something like Medicaid, and that's backed by the government agency, you don't want to be causing, a set of red flags as far as those transactions do.
Yeah, because it could look like, you're getting paid under the table, which becomes kind of a hiccup for the Medicaid. Mm-hmm. But the IRS is also really interested in that too.
Exactly. And so whenever you're dealing with a government agency like Medicaid, you have to be under the assumption that they have connections with the IRS in that situation too.
Yep. Now, once someone is say applying for Medicaid, do they produce those timesheets, or do they produce like the wage statements to prove to Medicaid that they really did pay somebody?
Yeah, so that's the exact reason why we want everything in writing and tallied for, because part of the job of the person applying for Medicaid is you have to be as transparent as possible. The people, going through these Medicaid applications are seeing it in a black and white manner. And if they're seeing such and such amount of money coming out the door, either through a check or through a wire transfer, there needs to be the backup for it. So the more details, the better. It definitely is a task to be keeping track of your time, but it's only going to help that person on the back end through their Medicaid application.
So it is possible for family members to receive payment, but there's a lot of details, and creating that that job contract. Is that something that you can help people with?
Definitely. So because it's a really great tactic to try and spend down assets for people that are deserving of receiving, compensation for their job as a caregiver, a document that kind of goes hand in hand with that a lot. If, say, a loved one and a parent is living with an adult child, and maybe it sounds really strange to charge your parent rent, that's another spend down tactic that you can have. So actually having a lease agreement between the person who owns the home and the tenant. Maybe your mom is paying rent to you directly every single month. That's what she would be doing if she was within the community renting an apartment. So she should be able to do the same for you. Same situation with having, same situation with having documentation. A lot of people have off the books rental agreements with family members, but you want to make sure that it's written down and in a legal way,
so that there's a paper trail and it can all be tracked.
Yes, exactly.
Are there any limits? Can one spouse get paid to care for the other spouse, or is that kind of odd?
Spouses, it becomes more of a conversation as far as the caregiving needs are, just because of how in touch that they are with that relationship in general. So we see caregiver agreements much more frequently with children that are taking care of loved ones, or even family members and friends that are helping out on the back end. But say, for example, if we have two caregivers, so maybe two children taking on that brunt of the work, you can have two separate caregiver agreements. So it's not as if only one person needs to be the caregiver. You can have two people acting in that role too.
Okay, so it could be that, the eldest child, maybe they're providing you with your transportation to your doctor's appointments and making sure that you're washed and dressed.
Yep.
And the second child, where maybe you live there, that they're responsible if you need help on the overnights. So that compensation may reflect the different responsibilities they have.
Correct. And kind of on that point as well, too, where we're seeing roadblocks with these documents, or roadblocks to even being a caregiver, is not having, legal documentation on the back end to get you access to those things. So in terms of a financial power of attorney or being the healthcare power of attorney, you do need to make sure that as you're aging, you're having those documents in place. That say if your daughter is the one taking you to your doctor's appointments, you want her to be involved with your specific care needs, maybe she's your healthcare power of attorney. And if we maybe want your son to be in charge of managing the checkbook, paying the bills, paying the caregiver, that maybe he's acting in that role as a financial power of attorney.
That's good. That is so important. People don't realize, I feel like, how important a healthcare power of attorney is. If you can't make your decisions known, you want somebody who can step in and speak for you.
Yeah.
That's so critical. Are there limitations if somebody is the financial power of attorney, like they have the ability to write out the checks for mom or dad's account? Does that become a barrier if they're the caregiver? Is it kind of like a conflict if they're authorizing the payments to themselves?
Sure. So there definitely could be a conflict. So normally a perfect power of attorney would speak to that. So there would be language in there related to either gifting needs or the ability to apply compensation to a financial power of attorney. So very similarly to having a caregiver agreement, if we're having someone acting in that financial power of attorney role, you can potentially have that document authorizing compensation to the power of attorney. Because in a similar way to caregiving, that being a job, being someone's financial power of attorney could be just as much of a task. So going to the bank, balancing the checkbook, keeping track of everything. So there should be an opportunity for them to potentially be reimbursed if that was the, person's wishes.
I would say that that's definitely not something that's a DIY, because it could look really kind of inappropriate.
Yep.
If you're saying, why, yes, I'm paying myself because I'm paying mom's bills, and it could look really weird.
And it's even a good point to note that with a financial power of attorney, it's so broad and it's giving you that direct financial access. You truly need to be trusting the person you're putting into that role. So if there's any level of distrust that you have that they maybe would be taking too much advantage of that, or if you think there might be a mismanagement of funds concern, that person should not be your power of attorney.
Totally makes sense. And people can reach out to you and get these things put into place.
Of course. So especially during an elder law consultation, there's a lot of moving parts. So someone who's maybe not in an emergency situation, maybe they're not necessarily in a nursing home thinking they need an elder law attorney right then and there to deal with a Medicaid application. There's a lot of things you can be doing to be proactive. Those caregiver agreements, lease agreements, powers of attorney, those are documents that should be done ahead of time while you have capacity, while you have the ability to make those decisions. So as early as possible, we can get those done for you.
And I would imagine it's also really important to include the person that you're naming as the caregiver, because there could be implications for their own income, assets, benefits for themselves.
Exactly. So the caregiver would be present and they would be signing that agreement too, agreeing to those services.
So no DIY willy-nilly. They should give you a call. And that's if they're calling, that's the 407-5975 number, right? And they can reach you?
Yep, they can reach us. Our website has great resources and education materials too. You can book a consultation through our website as well if you didn't feel like calling.
Oh, awesome. So that it simplifies the process.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I find it interesting that some of our younger generation is not as comfortable picking up the phone and actually speaking to somebody. So that's good.
We fit everybody's needs in that regard.
Oh, that's perfect. I've taken your time a couple times now to talk about this. So I really do appreciate you coming on today and talking about this, because we're only like the third Friday in January, and I've had a number of people call and ask about this. So I'm glad you had the opportunity to come on today and talk about this.
Definitely.
It's a hot topic.
I know it's a hot topic and it's confusing and there's a lot of ins and outs. So you always want to make sure you're with a professional for that too. I appreciate
100%.
you.
100%. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
To be able to be paid as a caregiver, but like we just said, it is not a do-it-yourself kind of document, because you can cause more harm than benefit. So you want to make sure that you get things in the proper order and ahead of the crisis to the extent possible. So I am glad that you have all joined me this Friday. I hope that you've hit the like, the share, all of those social media cues to let people know that they need to check this out, because there's a lot of misinformation on this topic out there. And you know that you can trust the information that we're providing. I look forward to seeing you all again next week. In the meantime, be well and be kind.
If you liked this video, please follow us on social media and subscribe on YouTube. For more information, visit rielderinfo.com or call 401-585-0509. If you have any questions, email deb@rielderinfo.com.